जय राधा माधव जय कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव जय कुंज बिहारी बुद्धि जनाधलाभ गिरिधरधारी गोपी जनाधलाभ गिरिधरधारी गिरिधरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रज जनरंजन यशोदानंदन व्रज जनरंजन ब्रज जनरंजन जमुना तीरा ब्रह्मचारी ब्रह्मचारी जमुना तीरा ब्रह्मचारी जय राधा माधव जय कुंज बिहारी माधव जय कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय राधा माधव जय कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव जय कुंज बिहारी जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत शिष्यनाथ से वैसी भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी शिल प्रभुपाद की जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत शिष्यनाथ से वैस भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki, ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki, Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Oh, glory to the assembled devotees. Oh, glory to the assembled devotees. Oh, glory to the assembled devotees. Oh, glory to Shishiguru and Shiguranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, the Second Volume, Chapter 36, The Slaying of Arista, the Bull Demon, text number 18 and 19. Nisanyata bhojapati kopatra chalitendriya nishatan asin adata vasudeva jigam saya Nishanya Bhojapati Gopatra Chalitendriya Nishatan Asin Adata Vasudeva Jigam Saya Nishanya Bhojapati Kopatra Chalitendriya Nishatan Asin Adhata Vasudeva Jigam Saya. Please chant. Nisanyata Bhojapati Kopatra Chalitendriya Nishatan Asin Adata Vasudeva Jigam Saya. Nishanyata Bhojapati Kopatra Chalitendriya Nishatan Asin Adata Vasudeva Jigam Saya. Nishamyata Bhojapati Kopatra Chalitendriya Nishatan Asin Adata Vasudeva Jigam Saya. Nishamya, hearing, tat, that, Bhojapati, the law of the Bhoja dynasty, Kamsa, Kopat, out of anger, Prachilita, disturbed, Indriyaha, his senses, Nishatan, sharp as in a sword. Adata took up Vasudeva Jigamsaya with the desire to kill Vasudeva. Translation and purport by the disciples of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Upon hearing this, the master of the Prajas became furious and lost control of his senses. He picked up a sharp sword to kill Vasudeva. Text number 19. Nivarito naradena tatsatao mityun atmanaha gitwaloha majayipasao babandha sahabaryaya. Translation. But Narada restrained Kamsa by reminding him that it was the two sons of Vasudeva who caused his death. Kamsa then had Vasudeva and his wife shackled in iron chains. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Ummilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurube Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Ramapa Swami Iti Namine. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirveshesha Shunyavadi Pashatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpa Tarobhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Here's a purport by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada on text number 19. Kamsa realized that there was no use in killing Vasudeva, since it was Vasudev's sons, Krishna and Balaram, who were to kill him. According to the Acharya, Narada also advised Kamsa that if he killed Vasudeva, the two young boys may flee, and that it was therefore better not to kill him. Rather, Narada recommended Kamsa should bring Krishna and Balaram to Kamsa's capital city, Mathura. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out that Narada did not act inimically towards the great devotees Vasudeva and Devaki when he revealed this information to Kamsa. In fact, as explained in the 11th canto, Vasudeva was grateful to Narada because he was arranging for Kamsa's death at Krishna's hands, and further arranging for Krishna to come to live in Mathura, where his loving father could associate with him. And here's the actual comment of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur on this verse 19. Narada prevented Kamsa from killing Vasudeva by giving the following advice. Quote, if you kill Vasudeva, Krishna and Balaram will flee in terror. Do not reveal to Vasudeva that you want to kill Krishna and Balaram. If you tell him, he will tell his friend Nanda, who will flee with his sons. Therefore, on some pretext, imprison Vasudeva and Devaki and bring Krishna and Balaram to Mathura. End of quote. One should not think that in saying this, Narada was being unkind to Devaki and Vasudeva. Rather, this was a sign of affection. After Krishna and Balaram arrived in Mathura, on seeing their children, they gave thanks to Narada. Thus, there was no fault in Narada suggesting that they be imprisoned. And Srila Jiva Goswami also comments, quote, if you kill his father, you should expect he will go into hiding somewhere, end of quote. Narada advised him that by binding Devaki and Vasudev, Krishna and Balaram will come to Mathura immediately to free them. He also bound Devaki in order to hasten Krishna's coming, or out of his evil nature. So it's a very remarkable action by Srila Narada Muni, seeing this type of arrangement by Narada Muni it may be confusing for regular people with concept of mundane morality. How can you explain that? That Narada is actually going to Kansa and revealing this whole thing, this whole arrangement that Vasudeva was directed by Krishna or by Lord Vishnu to do in order to protect Krishna and Balaram from, the evil Kamsa. So far, Krishna and Balaram has been in Vrindavan, and although, Kamsa, he got the information during the appearance of Durga Durga during the birth of Krishna, when the child was changed and, the daughter of Jasoda was brought to the prison, and when Kamsa came to kill the 8th child, he found out that it was a girl, but he was just about to kill that girl, and the girl appeared, as Durga Devi, and chastised him and told him that, you rascal, that the 8th child of Devaki already took birth, and he will kill you. So Kamsa didn't know where. He was very afraid. And then he started this campaign of trying to find, the 8th child of Devaki. But he didn't know. So he was sending demons all over the place to actually find, Krishna. And during that time also he freed Devaki and Vasudeva. He had a little bit of a change of heart. The appearance of Durga Devi chastising him sort of brought something to his consciousness, that he realized he did something very terrible to his sister by killing all the other 6, just born childs of Devaki and Vasudeva. And he freed them. And we know, throughout the pastimes of Krishna, how demons were coming to Vrindavan and being killed by Krishna. But somehow or other, in the pastam, it was not known by Kamsa that Krishna and Balaram were the actual sons of Devaki and Vasudeva. So Narada came to Kamsa after the killing of Arisasura. We hear the narration to tell him that, okay, here's the whole thing. This is what happened. So he revealed everything that was kept in secret. He revealed everything. that Krishna and Balaram are the 7 and 8 sons of Devaki and Vasudev. They are the ones who were destined to kill you, and they've been hiding in Vrindavan under the care of Nanda Maharaj. Vasudeva took them there, so he revealed everything. And of course, Kamsa being a demon, his immediate thing was, kill Vasudeva, who tricked him in this way, and who made all this arrangement, to hide all this, to make that arrangement, to hide Krishna. So, but Narada convincingly here, Narada actually sort of understood is the remarkable thing, the thing that sort of is fascinating is how expert Narada is. And in fact, you can tell how expert the pure devotee of the Lord, or the devotee of the Lord, is to understand how to connect, or how to understand the psychology and the nature of the person that they're dealing with, and give exactly what is needed. So therefore, these pure devotees of the Lord, they call representative of the Lord. They are in very much connection with the super soul. So as representative of the Lord, they're actually fulfilling the Lord's desire. The Lord's will is fulfilled through his pure devotees. So Shakshadaritwana Chamasta Shastra, therefore the devotees of the Lord are treated equally to the Lord, because they represent the Lord. They're as good as the Lord, because they represent exactly the desires and the interests of the Lord. So therefore, it is important, having this understanding, help us understand, having the understanding help us to see how Narada is acting perfectly by doing this apparent act of betraying, basically, Vasudeva and Devaki. Putting in danger. You're dealing with a vicious demon that is, has all the qualities that is narrated of demons, of demoniac mentality in a superlative, degree. So it appears that Narada is acting whimsically and putting Vasudeva and Devaki in danger, and then Krishna and Balaram in danger too. Externally appears like that, but no. Narada is in perfect contact with the Lord's desires and the Lord's purpose. And therefore he's always acting on that platform. So everything he does is perfect. Therefore the recommendation is that the acharyas give us is, you don't try, if we condition souls, we should not try to think that we can understand the mind and the purpose of a pure devotee. So when a the way the pure devotee acts is always in perfect sync with Krishna's purposes. So, the expertise of the devotee, the expertise in understanding what's the right thing to say to anyone in a particular circumstance and the particular circumstances that surround that. It's quite wonderful. And now that throughout the Bhagavatam, we hear over and over and over how he deals with all kinds of people in all kinds of situations. From Mugari the hunter, how he instructed him and was able to bring him to Krishna consciousness very, very expertly. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that a saintly person is very much in tune with the realities of the people that he's dealing with. So, in the chapter 3, he says that, so as not to disrupt the minds of the ignorant, men attached to fruitless soul of prescribed duties, a learned person should not induce them to stop work. So, understanding that someone who is conditioned by false ego, by material nature, when you connect to them, you cannot connect to them in a way that disturbs the mind, because that's inappropriate. So the devotee understands how to connect to people in a way that you don't disturb their mind, but you're actually able to bring them, to actually connect them in some way. So Krishna recommends those who are so attached, you don't induce them to stop working, to stop doing the activities that they are attached for. That's not the way that the saintly person does. But rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness. So Narada, in the beginning, when he connected with Mugrari, he didn't tell him, stop hunting. He told him, kill them fully. Why do you have killing them? So, Mugrari then say, well, I have this because my father, that's how I've been taught to do it. That's how I have done it my whole life. And that's how, traditionally, how I learned from my father, and my father's fathers like that. So, immediately, by that approach, then this man is open. And then Narada was able to connect to him. And then Narada showed him the results of actually the suffering that he's causing. And then that sobered up Mugrari. And then Mugrari says he realized that he set himself to tremendous amount of suffering by the actions that he's doing. So he asked Narada to please tell him a way out of that type of entanglement. And Narada engaged him, gave him, a prescribed duties, prescribed activities, regulated activities that he should do. And that elevated Mugrari so very expertly. And like that, Narada, Srila Narada Muni, throughout the Bhagavatam, so many examples of his expertise. But in this case, he is not elevating Kamsa. he's inducing Kamsa to actually continue to be antagonistic towards Krishna. He's inducing him to be antagonistic. He's agitating him, because Kamsa immediately, he was overcome by anger. Is explained here. But Narada. So why Narada is doing this? Why is he the question is, why is he actually he could apply his Narada power and sort of sober also Kamsa. But first, Kamsa is not Murgari. Kamsa is Kamsa. So Narada, possibly Kamsa was not going to react, being open to Narada Muni to actually give him good instruction. And the purpose of the Lord, was to kill Kamsa. So Narada simply, became the medium by which this arrangement was that Krishna will come to Mathura to kill Kamsa. So among the pure devotees of Narada Muni, Vasudeva, and Devaki, they all were, fine with the whole thing. They were not, Vasudeva and Devaki were not, what does he do? He just, sold us out, what did we do? Any of that drama. They were actually very grateful. And Krishna was very graceful, so it was all quite perfect. So it's quite something. So the idea is that we should aspire to be, to gain this expertise, this skill, to be able to be very, very tuned in on how to connect to people. In general, when in most of us level, the tendency is to see the world through our own lenses and our own reality. So many of the skills that are taught in terms of hearing empathetically, is we encourage to hear more and to try to understand from the perspective of the person that we're hearing to, or that we're dealing with, rather than to immediately trying to take the circumstances and process it to my reality. But my reality, my way of seeing things, may not be the same, most likely, of the way the other person sees things or experiences things. So in many cases, we find the problem that we don't fully connect to the person. And in some cases, we can experience that instead, trying to help, we actually do worse. Persons becomes, disturbed in their mind, trying to become sort of pacify and like that. So it's quite a skill, but it's a skill that is necessary for devotees if we actually, following Krishna's instruction. So we have to be very thoughtful. And the first thing The first principle is to come to understanding that, that there's diversity, that my way of processing the world is not the way of any different persons of processing the world. There's differences. So we have to be very respectful of, and having that understanding that, okay, there's this circumstance, and this circumstance, I see it this way. Because I see it this way doesn't mean that is the way. I'm going to actually take a note that, in this level, because I'm seeing through this conditioned body, then I'm not necessarily going to trust this as the absolute truths. Because when I hear, the way you process the same thing, I may see, okay, there's a difference here. Sometimes very, very, very different. Sometimes even contrary. So, how can I tell you're wrong and I'm right? When that is right for you, is wrong for me. So, from your perspective, you're right. From my perspective, you're wrong. So, that space is a space of is a space of duality. So how do we know what is right? Well, we have heard that is Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. So it have to be, there in the scriptures what Krishna says. Some people like hot food, some people like bland food. Krishna likes what he says in the Bhagavad Gita, not too much, not too little. Like that. He likes food in the mood of goodness. So he likes things, what he say about 16th chapter about foods in the mood of goodness. Not too hot, not too spicy, not too salty, not too pungent. He say that. In our level, because the reality is that we are conditioned by this body. My body likes like this. I feel, the body feels, recognize that, I feel comfortable with that, and therefore this is my reality. So can I say, it's not good for you? No, I cannot say that. But I can say, Krishna says, this is how it should be. So, it's those who like Prabhupada's plain, we hear, my spiritual master was telling about a devotee who used to, in Prabhupada's time, who used to eat only raw food. And, eventually his health was not very good. Because for certain bodies, raw food, like for me, for my body, my constitution, the Ayurvedic doctor said that I cannot eat, I have to, that cook the vegetables is better than to eat it raw. You have to have a very strong digestive, so if you have to be a kappa, like pita, very, very big fire to consume that. So I have some bata and I need help like that. So these things are there. So therefore, in our level, we have to be very thoughtful. We have to be trying to understand and accept the reality of other people and be able to connect like that. I read a little bit a commentary by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur on the Bhagavad Gita verse, which is, very, very nice. You should not disturb the mind of those who are attached to action, because their impure hearts, by saying, quote, this karma is despicable, give up action and become successful like me by practicing jnana, end of quote. Instead, one should engage in actions by saying, quote, perform actions without desire and become successful. End of quote. Doing those actions, you set an example for others. Quote, but according to the Bhagavatam, this is a contrary to the statement of the Lord. So, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, brings a statement in the Bhagavatam that says the contrary of what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. So again, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, do not disturb them by telling them stop working. Actually, encouraging to work, but work in devotion, like that. But in the Bhagavatam, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti quotes the Bhagavatam in 6th canto, chapter 9, text 50. A pure devotee who is fully accomplished in the science of devotional service will never instruct a foolish person to engage in fruitive activities for material enjoyment, not to speak of helping him in such activities. Such a devotee is like an experienced physician who never encourages the patient to eat food injurious to his health, even if the patient desires it. So appears to be contrary. In one sense, don't tell them not to stop working, encourage them to work, but to work without attachments and desires. And the other one says that you should never instruct them. You should never instruct them. Or even help them or encourage them, because it's going to be bad for them. So, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti resolved this. True, but this is in relation to instructions given about bhakti. It's not contrary to giving instructions about jnana. Jnana is depending on purity of the heart. And purity of the heart is depending on action without desire. So, the devotee understands the different levels, So, and in the scriptures, when we hear those instructions for different levels, like that. So, when Krishna in the 3rd chapter is telling Arjuna that a pure devotee doesn't, it deals with a regular person like this. He is talking about a person who is devoid, who have no jnana, no transcendental knowledge. So, from the perspective of transcendental knowledge, then you can try to bring people to first understanding of how to understand who I am, You're a spirit soul. Who is God? There's a supreme being. And what is this material world? And what is my relationship with these things? So that is transcendental knowledge. So the first thing is that we start to bring people to receive transcendental knowledge. With transcendental knowledge, then we can be engaged in the activities of devotional service. But when we talk here about when things are discouraged in this verse, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, is when we're talking about pure devotional service. To preach to people about pure devotional service that is devoid of jnana and also of karma is too way over their heads. You first get to people to actually be able to understand how to practice this mix, this devotional service in which karma is mixed. It's not pure devotional service, it's mixed. It's what is called karma mishra bhakti or jnana mishra bhakti. It's mixed, and then gradually, by those practices, regulated practices, then the heart becomes purified and you come to bhakti. So there's expertise, there's understanding of people's capacities, of people's level, and then we get instructed like that. And from the perspective of many of us who are in that mixed level, that there's mixed condition, material desires and material attachments, and there's also our acceptance to the path of devotional service. And for us, we have to cultivate, we have to be very conscientious that in our level, we cannot speak like the pure devotees. And we have to be even much more careful about, how we connect with people. You always have to be from the perspective of respect, and from the perspective of humility, tolerance, and patience. All these things have to be in place, because I understand also my position. I am, and therefore I have to make sure, that's why Prabhupada trained us, that when we preach, that's why we study the scriptures, that's why we cultivate transcendental knowledge. We quote Krishna. So if I was going to tell you, that, that this is better, suppose this is a better way of living, or this is, like say with food, this is how food should be, then you can say, well, it works for you, but it doesn't work for me. But when you quote Krishna, then Krishna says this is how food should be. And so then it's not me, it's Krishna saying. And as far as me is concerned, I'm trying to learn how to live according to Krishna, and I encourage you to do the same, to try to learn how to live according to what Krishna says. So we are in the same boat. It's not, necessarily that I'm, so So like that's how we connect. We connect from what we learn from the Parampara, when we learn from the scriptures, and we communicate that from the perspective that I'm also trying to reach that type of platform of being able to be an example of someone who lives under Krishna's instructions. So we moving forward towards that space. When we are fully in that space, that is called the Brahma Buddha stage. That's when actually we're able to start pure devotional service, Sudha Bhakti, in that stage. Before that is mixed Bhakti. So we're moving towards that, and Krishna's arrangement, Krishna's system is to help us to reach to that level. And once you reach to that level, real devotional service start, then we can start to experience the mellows of devotional service. So Narada Muni gives us a wonderful example throughout the Bhagavatam of a Shaktivesh avatar of this type of capacity, the capacity to broadcast the message of Godhead to the world, to the conditioned world, like, with the Shakti of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So his Shaktivesh avatar on that is like Srila Kripa was singing yesterday. Narada Muni Bhajabina Radhika Ramananame. So he's constantly chanting the glories of Radhika Raman and enlightening everyone expertly. So we follow in the footsteps. Narada Muni is in our disciplic succession and one of our acharyas. So, like that. Any comments or questions? You bring a little volume to that microphone one.
So you were highlighting this wonderful capacity that Narada Muni has of truly being able to be completely aligned with Krishna's desires, and this particular incident highlighting that extraordinary capacity. So I was...
it's good now.
I was looking from the perspective of the effect on somebody who actually takes instruction from an extraordinary personality that's completely aligned with Krishna's desires. So in this case, Kamsa followed those instructions, and he imprisoned Vasudeva and Devaki instead of killing Vasudeva. So he's actually following an instruction coming from Narada. So that must be to his great advantage, is it not?
Totally, but that's Narada's expertise. Like, the pure devotee understands exactly what's the right thing for the person to positively react, So that's the wonderful skill, and expertise. So he was able to say exactly the same things that the mentality of Kamsa will react to that and will follow. So it was to the point. The mentality of the demoniac person, because Krishna explains that in the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, that they, feel themselves so powerful, and then the enemies they will kill, they're in control, they're basically God, perfect and powerful and happy, although he was completely miserable and full of anxieties, So, Narada was so expert. And the fact is that Kamsa followed his instructions to the T. And at the end, he got the mercy of Krishna. He was killed by Krishna. So, yeah.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for the class. You were mentioning do not instruct the minds of the ignorant, something to that extent, and engage them in devotion. Is that correct?
Did that say that?
Do not disturb the mind of the ignorant. Yeah. Engage them in to work, but in devotion. Yeah. But sometimes that's an obstacle. Because if you try to engage them, they're like, you're trying to tell me what to do. And the first thing that came to mind when I heard this is that the famous pastime of St. Francis, where St. Francis went to a church known as the San Damiano Church. And there was a cross, a crucifix of Jesus in this church known as the San Damiano Cross. And it's described that St. Francis heard Jesus speak to him through this cross, where he told St. Francis, he says, "My dear St. Francis, please repair the church." So initially, St. Francis renovated the church because it was in ruins, like Jitendra does. But then later on, after he renovated the church, later on the inspiration came to him that repair the church actually meant reform the church, reform the people in the church. And the church as a whole, not just that particular church, but the whole Catholic religion, basically. And now you would think when Francis was given this inspiration by God, he would go to everyone and instruct them. God spoke to me, you listen to me, shut up, you do what I say, God. No, but St. Francis spoke a very profound word. He's quote, he says, "Preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words." And this is also what Lord Chaitanya did with the Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Now, you would think Lord Chaitanya listened to Sarvabhauma Acharya for 7 days straight, while Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya spoke for 7 days straight. But actually, Lord Chaitanya also spoke for 7 days straight. How? There's a famous saying, actions speak louder than words. And Lord Chaitanya was patiently listening to him without looking at his phone, his iPhone, without rolling his eyes while looking at the clock. And so we see that Lord Chaitanya was he didn't try to give unsolicited advice to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Why? Because he didn't overestimate his ability to change others. Why do we give people unsolicited advice? Because we overestimate our ability to change others. So there's a nice quote. It says, "Never underestimate the power to change yourself. Never overestimate your power to change others." So we see that that's why I really appreciate this pastime, because there's also another quote that says, "Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care." So although Lord Chaitanya knows everything, he acts like he doesn't know anything. Therefore, he doesn't give unsolicited advice. Even though we don't know anything, we act like we know everything. Therefore, we give unsolicited advice. So my question is that especially when we're in a leadership position, the tendency is, or a managerial position, the tendency is to kind of, yes, we know what the minor rules and regulations, but the tendency is to automatically make oneself the shit your grill someone and try to shove advice down somebody's throat without that relationship, that loving relationship in there, without that listening tendency. So what are some steps we could avoid these pitfalls, especially when we take a leadership or managerial position, from shoving unsolicited advice down people's throats, and then people leave or they're forced to leave?
It's a matter of maturity, from all sides. When you take position of leadership, you don't have the space to, you can't afford to be lacking on that type of skill, because it can create difficulties in performing your service. But the fact is that all of us, each one of us, to come to Krishna consciousness, we have to cultivate that. So, from the perspective of someone who is a manager or someone who is being managed, the direction that we receive in Krishna consciousness, regardless, is that we have to cultivate this humility, tolerance, respect, like that. And when from my perspective, if I being sort of misunderstood or feel mistreated by someone who is in a position of responsible position of management, I have to start to see things also from a different perspective, from a perspective of, what is the part that I'm playing, how I am reacting, what is Krishna trying to teach me, all these type of things, being very internal in how you process things and not reacting to my false ego. So from one perspective is that, but from people who are in the management, yes, you can afford not being very careful about that skill, because it's part of one's service that one has to reach out and make arrangement for others to actually flourish. The whole idea of managing is that you have to facilitate the growth and the flourish in Krishna consciousness of the people that you're managing. We hear the narrations of great kings, how their whole focus is to facilitate the well-being of the whole kingdom, like that. The Kshatriya responsibility. Kshatriya means to protect. So in these positions require, there's a greater responsibility, but on the other hand, each one of us, we should be very mindful to understand and to be able to capture, see from the perspective of people's heart. If you have a leader who is honest, in one sense, who is sincere, and is honestly trying to do their best, in our level, none of us is asking us to be, there's not so many that I know that, you want power. There's some, but in general, it's like you're being basically thrown into that service. I would prefer to do my, keep doing my simple service here, but, at one point, this responsibility is being assigned to you, and you just do it because of dutifully. So, but sometimes you're not, you don't feel equipped to do it fully, but you try your best. And obviously you're gonna make some mistakes, and sometimes you can hit a blind spot and you just don't see yourself making a mistake. Later, Krishna will expose you. You know, if you're sincere, Krishna will expose that to you, and if you're sincere, you will realize, oh my God, I was so wrong. And then you correct yourself. So, from our perspective, we can see people's sincerity and also appreciate that they're doing their best. And from that perspective, we can, you know, rather than to take it personally, we can see that, you know, it's a way that Krishna is purifying the whole thing collectively and individually. And I just have to tune in on my purification, you know, of the power of my purification. And if we all do that, then we can really help each other and inspire each other when we, each one of us, cultivate that sense of looking internally, looking inside, and being able to deal with each other like that. It's progressive, individually and collectively. So it's a matter of maturity for all of us. In maturity, what does Srila Rupa Goswami tell us? Well, maturity doesn't come like that. Srila Rupa Goswami just tells us that we have, you know, we remain enthusiastic and we exercise patience. We have faith. We believe in we have faith in the process. We remain enthusiastically because we have faith. We know, we see it. And we should have patience with us and with others. That, you know, that people are going through the process. Like if I see someone that is sincere and they're trying their best, you know there is a matter of time. Krishna is looking after them. Because Krishna accepts, you know, the service of all of us with all our faults. He just sees, you know, the devotion. And he helps us purify our weaknesses. So if we learn to see from Krishna's perspective, then we're very embracing of all devotees and appreciate them. So, like that. I'm going to stop here. I know, you know, it's 8:40, so thank you so much. Garantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.